Okay, so Vince Yoder, beg your pardon, Vince, says, "Hey, Bill, greetings from a steely-eyed missile man of the 91st Missile Wing up in snowy Minnow, North Dakota. Greetings, Vince. You're a real deal steely-eyed missile man. I'm glad to know that. I'm very glad to know that if there's anything I can ever do for the people who sit in those underground bunkers on top of nuclear weapons, keeping us safe from these savages, anything I can do for you guys is the least I can do." So Vince says, "Hope you and your mother had a great Christmas holiday." We did, thank you very much. I just got back from Florida this morning. I'm beat. Flew there and back, and it's a lot of flying, and I'm tired. Anyway, here's my question. He says, "What do you think of the recent Breitbart article written, in parentheses, by Putin, talking about how Russia is in a better position than America to secure Western civilization due to Russia being governed or ruled from a conservative and outwardly pro-religious position?" Haven't read the article. I didn't have time to read it. But what I presume is that Breitbart ran an article ostensibly written by Putin, basically saying, here's why Vladimir Putin is actually a better defender and champion of conservative principles than the President of the United States of America. I did see a quick reaction on this from Glenn Reynolds over at Instapundit, and I kind of agree with him on this. It's interesting rhetorically, and it's pointed, and I'll get to that in a second. But I'm not one of these people that says because Vladimir Putin is a strong man, and because Vladimir Putin is protecting his people, and because Vladimir Putin doesn't believe in political correctness, and because Vladimir Putin is returning his country to these kind of sound principles of family and all this other stuff. That doesn't make me a fan of Vladimir Putin. Putin is a murderer. He's murdered people with his own hands. Of that, I'm quite positive, without question. Without question, he's ordered thousands of people to their deaths. There's extremely good evidence that he ordered the sabotage and subsequent plane crash of a commercial jetliner that had troublesome Polish dignitaries on board. He's a KGB murderer, and he's an animal, and he's a genuine savage, and he's not our friend. And as Glenn pointed out in Instapundit, I think what many Americans like us look at, and when we see Putin, because I have to convince, I will say this, with all of that said, as Glenn pointed out, and as I suppose your point here too, Vince, there's much to admire about him in terms of his strength and his mental toughness. And in many cases, the president of Russia is far, far less of a communist than the president of the United States. He really is. He's just not a good guy, and makes you wonder what would happen if it was a good guy who had some of these policies. Now, Putin has policies towards homosexuals that are just, barbaric. They're barbaric, and that needs to be said. And his policies towards a lot of things are barbaric. But I think the reason that some Americans are drawn to him is that he is not putting up with any of this PC rollover. There's a difference between accepting homosexuals and glorifying their lifestyle and making it mandatory that you not only accept it, but that you endorse it and you promote it, as we found out from the Duck Dynasty thing. Putin doesn't put up with any of that crap. And I think the only thing I'll say about Putin positive is that mentally he is so much more of a match for Barack Obama. I mean, it really is Bambi versus Godzilla out there. You see pictures of Putin. He's out there, he's out there hunting Siberian tigers without a shirt in the middle of the snow, and he's using a bow that he fashioned from, his mother's femur, and he somehow needed to, he sectioned off a part of his own intestines and strung it together to make the bow string. This kind of super tough guy kind of thing, and I find that to be silly. I just find it to be silly. All these pictures of him out there riding a horse through the stream, with his bulging muscles, and he's got an AK or something strapped over his back. This kind of posturing machoism. The fact that appeals to his people is an indication that we are facing some really, really backwards and brutal people. And Vince, if you weren't sitting out there on top of peacemakers, with kilotons, if not megatons, of the bright white light of freedom on top of them, then we'd be at the mercy of these animals and savages. So, when I look at Putin, all I think about is, I remember when we had a president who rode a horse, and I remember a couple presidents who rode horses and would go out and clear brush for recreation, and who weren't afraid of things, and who weren't afraid to face the fact that we have enemies in the world, and who had a clear understanding of who we were and what we were about. And I've seen pictures of Ronald Reagan on a horse. I've seen pictures of George Bush on a horse. I've seen them both out there clearing brush, doing manly things, and I considered both of them to be strong men, confident men, guys who didn't have a whole lot of doubt about what they believed. Now, you didn't have to agree with them, and there were cases where I disagreed with Bush quite a lot, and cases where I disagreed with Reagan rarely. But I did disagree with them. But I thought they were strong, good men. And I think Vladimir Putin is a strong, bad man. And this is the fundamental difference, really. And something we have to be very careful about. I don't think Barack Obama is a strong man or a good man. And you can spin this Mandela funeral any way you want to. There's always the great thing about the Obama administration is there's always somebody willing to come forward and fall on their sword. So the guy that took the pictures of Michelle giving him the evil eye while Obama's flirting with this kind of pretty, was it Danish or Finnish prime minister? And then when he goes and comes back, now they're switching seats so that he's not sitting next to her anymore. I'm sorry, you're not spinning that. That man is whipped. He's whipped. He's always been whipped. He's been raised by women his whole life. He's had nothing but women in his life. His mom was a extremely forceful, very nasty piece of work. Barack Obama's mom, Stanley. His mom, Stanley. How would she not be a basket case with a name like Stanley? And his grandmother, who raised him, seems by all accounts to have been actually a very decent person, but a strong person. And the men in Obama's life, Dad disappeared. Before he had, Dad disappeared, if the official story is true, a week or two after he was born. Hardly ever saw him again. Dad went to Harvard, and Stanley and Mom went to Vancouver, I guess, and back to Seattle. So here's a guy who's never had a strong dad in his life. He's had his grandfather, who had very sketchy, hanging out with Frank Marshall Davis in these horrible places, surrounded by pornographic cartoons of Disney characters when he's 5 or 6 years old, growing up. I'd love to tell you that this is just me being a right-wing lunatic. And that's not to say I'm not a right-wing lunatic. But that's all from his book, in his own words, his own autobiography, which is, is stapled together from pieces of things that actually happened, or may actually have happened, or if didn't actually happen, should have happened. And these things are woven together to create little scenes that are not real history, but what the history should have been. But in any event, he was just completely whipped by his wife. And if you listen to how he talks about her and how she talks about him, every time she gets on Oprah, we talked about this before, I don't want to spend too much more time with this, but every time Michelle gets on Oprah, she says, yes, Barack sometimes doesn't take a shower often enough, or he doesn't clean up his socks, or I have to clean up after him on this, or Barack made a mess of the place, or Barack likes to play too much video games, or Barack is out there, and then when he talks about her, you'll hear him say things like, yeah, Michelle won't let me have an iPhone. Michelle won't let me play more than an hour of this. Michelle will only let me watch an hour of basketball. Michelle will let me do this. Michelle won't let me do that. And I don't care if you're the president or not. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's unmanly and embarrassing. And as I said before, if I'm out in public on TV and I'm married to somebody, I don't care what my position is. I could just be, I could be the guy who doesn't matter. Right? But if I'm out in public, or certainly if I'm on television or on the news, and my wife is saying to me, yeah, he's kind of a mess, yeah, he doesn't really, it's like, after that taping is over, we're going back home. We're going to have a serious conversation. And for God's sakes, if I'm an elected official, and if I'm the president of the United States, I'm going to have a little talk with Michelle, and I'm going to basically say, you will never speak about me that way in public ever again, or you will be the former First Lady of the United States, and I'll still be the president. You will never, ever speak about me in public that way, ever again, ever. And if you don't like it, I can arrange to have a helicopter take you someplace else. Any questions? And so when you compare a guy who's that weak in every way, and if you don't think the Russians look at this, of course they do. They do. And you compare him to a guy like Vladimir Putin, who's probably garroted people, certainly murdered them, and certainly ordered them murdered. It's Bambi versus Godzilla. And I'll close this little thought by saying, folks, we have the best military not only in the world, best military in the history of the world. We have the amount of power that is at our fingertips, and the ability to project that power around the world is awesome, awe-inspiring. And again, made possible through guys like Vince and all the rest of you veterans out there, retired or active duty. But the thought that occurred to me is, it doesn't matter how strong your sword and shield are, if your sword arm and your shield arm are attached to a coward or a weakling or both.